parkour, a relatively new sport and one that falls into the extreme sports category alongside skateboarding. It gained popularity in the 2000s and has become popular around the world. Its roots are very much in the UK, with teams such as Storer and freerunners such as Benj Cave or Drew Taylor, to the most famous of spots such as IMAX. More recently, it has progressed globally. Athletes such as Dom Tomato and the course which he helped set up in China named the Skyladder course. It's fair to say that something that was unknown a few decades ago has now become one of the most recognisable sports in the whole world. Its impact is wide and has inspired lots of media, such as parkour scenes in films such as James Bond's Casino Royale, or even the nimble rooftop running and climbing as seen in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Despite all this, however, we have only seen one series that's truly tried to tackle solely the idea of freerunning in a game, and where it has let the player become the traceur. That was Mirror's Edge. Released by EA back in 2008, in a time where they were actually a respected company and not consumed by loot boxes. It came out to good fanfare at the time, with people enjoying the responsive movement and relatively new idea of freerunning that it brought. But what truly makes it special? Is this game the reason that other developers haven't tried to replicate the same parkour experience? Are people simply blinded by their nostalgia? And does the game still hold up after 14 long years? Or prepare to jump across a building and grab some popcorn as I look into Mirror's Edge and describe why it's almost perfection. The gameplay loop of Mirror's Edge is quite simple to begin with. It progressively gets harder, like most single-player games. Where this game differs is that a lot of its progressive difficulty is found in its obstacles. This, to me, conveys the idea of a freerunner growing in skill and confidence to complete these challenging obstacles. It's this that gives a sense of satisfaction as you play through the game, doing noticeably harder challenges. But how do you pass these at times seemingly impossible obstacles? Well, as Faith, you can obviously jump very far, slide under gaps, balance across beams, vault, climb up, wall run. You get the idea. The game provides all these mechanics alongside a momentum system. This means that certain gaps require a certain amount of speed in order to clear the gap. These mechanics come together to create a somewhat realistic parkour experience. There is also some combat in the game. Combat sections are few and far between, makes them feel very impactful when you come across them. As Faith, you have the ability to disarm the guards and use their weapons, but to me it gives a feeling that you aren't really meant to use the gun as Faith, as it isn't one of her skills. Her skills are in parkour. These mechanics come together to create something that keeps you engaged throughout the entire game. I always felt like the game was throwing new mechanics at me and making the game feel fresh. They still hold up great to this day. And as I said before, DICE and EA really set the bar so high that it's very difficult for another game developer to provide a similar experience. When it comes to parkour, the city and overall architecture is one of the most important aspects. This is another area where Mirror's Edge shines bright above the rest. Visually, the city is stunning. The game uses a simple yet effective art style. Incredible vistas from the rooftops and lighting that was way ahead of its time. From beginning until end, you see how DICE masterfully crafted the city for the sole purpose of parkour. Every pipe you run across, every wall you will run to the other side of, and every jump you make feels intentional and not out of place. This city exists for parkour, but it's created in such a way where you see how it can exist without parkour. On the rooftops you hear the bustling noises of people below, going about their everyday city tasks. You see advertisements of companies in this world using the city as a marketplace. But you, as Faith, stand above the city and forge your own path without the people of the City of Glass ever knowing that you are there. Each level provides a different section of the city. Whether it's the rooftops early on, to running through shopping malls, to even being on a boat, you really get to see the depth of this parkour playground. This not only keeps the gameplay fresh, but immerses you in the city, and the sheer number of places you visit showcases the use of parkour in being free and allowing someone to reach a multitude of different places. Overall, it's the world of Mirror's Edge, which works silently in the background as you sprint, jump, and climb through it, that provides the base for all these gameplay mechanics that I outlined above to work. The average player might not see the beauty of this world, but as I look back 14 years later, I see a game that has stood the test of time, and will continue to do so with its excellently crafted world and quite simply beautiful art style. Let's first begin with a recap of the story. I will warn you now that there are spoilers ahead. The story begins with Faith in training, after a fall, and is taught by a character known as Celeste. This is in order to regain some of her parkour skills. After a murder of a politician, our main protagonist Faith and Kate Connors are targeted by the Blues and must escape, after it seemingly looks like Kate was the one who killed the politician. In the early missions, we continue to escape from the Blues, providing for some intense gameplay. This also tells us the police are hunting down the group of runners. We spend the next couple of missions attempting to find the real murderer, until we come across the suspect's rope burn. When confronted, however, he admits that he hired someone to do it for him. However, before we can save him, our masked runner shoots him and runs off. We track this runner on multiple occasions. However, it's not until many missions later before we can finally unmask them and find it to be Celeste, who is the character that trained us earlier in the game. The next task is to save Kate from being jailed. We do this by sniping at a police convoy. This allows us to save Kate from the wreckage and get away. As the game reaches its end, we are told Kate has been captured again, so we must climb to the rooftop of the Shard building where Kate is. However, a character who had previously helped us in the game, Jackknife, had Kate held at gunpoint. He says the whole time it was his plan to bait the freerunners in order to finish them all off. In one last sequence, we make the final jump and kick Jackknife off the helicopter and save Kate one last time, and the runners win, for now. The story is pretty solid from start to finish. I enjoyed the twists and never quite ever knowing who it was that was behind all of this. The story wasn't quite captivating enough to cause any true emotions. However, Faith is a great main protagonist who stands for freedom. This is important as the key theme of the story is that these runners want freedom in a city that seems to be running out of it. Advertisements show large corporations taking over, and many of the missions showcase a police force doing everything they can to remove the freedom from the runners. The concept I take away from the story is that no matter how far away you reach for freedom, it is never fully achievable, and for many, we are constrained by the walls of a city, never truly able to reach our potential. All the features I've mentioned above paint a picture of a perfect game. The game also has built-in speedruns and time trials for those looking for an experience after the story or to take the game's mechanics to the next level. What we have on paper is a game that works intuitively, with its world acting as the perfect base for its superb parkour mechanics to shine, and an interesting and meaningful story to support it. Alongside this, there are multiple game modes as outlined before, to keep the player interested. But, as the title may suggest, I still consider this game to be, well, almost perfect. And after everything I have said to praise this game, you might be wondering why. You see, the idea of parkour since its inception is the sense of freedom. The ability to look at landscapes in new ways and traverse them in any way, but also the idea to tackle any path in a multitude of different ways. The game does explore the idea of freedom, with Faith symbolising freedom. In the missions, you escape from the Blues, or effectively the city's police force, which again is a sense of freedom. And finally, the runners themselves have always wanted freedom from the city, which seems to be drowning in corporations and politics. Despite all of this, I still see a void which the game didn't fill, and one that, whilst not 100% necessary, would really have taken this game into the perfect territory. The game never truly lets you be free. What, I hear you asking? A parkour game that lets you run and jump across rooftops and even escape the police. How is that not freedom, you might say? Well, it's the idea of being constrained that I come back to here, as each level, despite seeming so expansive, is just so linear. Each obstacle has a defined way in which it should be tackled, and to me, that's not what parkour is. Parkour is seeing an obstacle and creatively traversing it. I spoke to a freerunner for research for this video, and they stated parkour is the most freedom you can experience. That ability to go anywhere and do whatever you want is so important to them. Not being told or having a predefined route over or around the obstacle is what's important. But maybe it was hardware limitations. The game is 14 years old after all. Or maybe it was what the game was going for. I mentioned in the story section, the game gives that sense that freedom is never truly achievable. Either way, only the developers know why the game has linearity, making it feel enclosed and less free, but it's the area of the game that holds it back from reaching the upper echelon of video games. Overall, it was a blast revisiting this game. As I already knew the story, I was able to focus on the detailed world whilst once again experiencing all those mechanics that I had grown to love when I first played the game. Everything I mentioned in this video doesn't just stand for when the game first came out, but it stands for now. 14 years later, and this game still feels great, and to me it's just timeless. It's one of EA and DICE's finest pieces of art, released in a time where EA seemed to be able to get the best out of the developers, but it seems recently corporate greed and complacency has led them to decline. I pointed out my only issue with the game in the freedom it gives the player, but if I were to remove that entire view, there is still an absolutely beautiful game that does justice to the sport of parkour despite its linearity. It is for these reasons why I give Mirror's Edge an 87 out of 100 score. If it were to just have that sense of freedom that I desired going into this game, then the sky would truly be the limit for Mirror's Edge. I know that there is a sequel for Mirror's Edge, which I am yet to play due to some bad reviews when it came out. However, after hearing it was open world, I am now more inclined to try it, because it might give that sense of freedom I'm after. If any of you have tried the game, feel free to let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, despite Mirror's Edge getting so close, this is why it's almost perfection.